The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
One of the most widely discussed issues in Judaism right now is the topic of Agunos. Becoming an Aguna is devastating, and through a huge online campaign, it has been brought to the forefront of Jewish discussion. And while there are certainly organizations here in America and in Israel that help fight against this crisis, we thought we'd bring in a more international flavor to this discussion.
Hi, I'm Rifka Meyer. I am the co-founder and president of GETToutUK.
Hi, I'm Ramie Smith. I am the executive director and co-founder of GETToutUK.
Rifka and Ramie will show us how this issue is being handled outside the States, what issues they run into that may be different from how we have to go about things here, and why this fight isn't going to fade away. Rifka and Ramie, thank you so much for joining me this week. I'm very excited for this particular episode, and I'll get into why in a little bit. If you can tell me a little bit about your organization, about GETToutUK, and how you each came to be either a part of it or founding it.
So, okay, hi. Thank you for having us. It's really great to be here. So GETToutUK came to be about 8 months ago now. I myself was an Aguna. I had been waiting 9.5 years for my get. Tried everything and anything, and last July 2020, I saw a campaign on Instagram and I decided to jump on board. It's called Keeping It Real campaign. And I just decided that what people see and know about me, and I do have a public thing on Instagram about for my salon, isn't always what you get. And I decided to be vocal about the whole Aguna situation and crisis before any of the Aguna talk was about at that point. So the response was huge. I did some lives. The lives got shared like 10,000 times. I saw there was a huge gap in the market, and it's something I really wanted to jump on. But I have a full-time job. I have lots going on in my life, thank God. And Ramie was my client. I was sitting in my chair one day and was talking to me about my life and being vocal about being an Aguna. And I was just like, there's so much to do and whatever. And she's like, so what are you doing about it? And I'm like, I'm doing wigs. What do you mean, what am I doing about it? I don't have time to do anything. I wish I could, but I don't know this. My head is buzzing. And she's like, well, I'll help you. I mean, we both never started a charity or worked on an organization like this. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Come on, let's go. And that's how GETToutUK was born. And 3.5 or 4 weeks later, I received my get. At that point, I had no idea when we formed GETToutUK that it was going that direction. It happened overnight. And that same week, 3 gets were given because we had made this organization, and the men actually got scared that there's now a force behind this crisis here, and we are going to deal with this.
Right, so it's not just an assortment of random individual people, it's now you're fighting as a group.
Yeah, it's not a topic anyone spoke about until recently. It's a topic people like to be like, oh, that's sad. Okay, let's move on. It's awkward. And suddenly we became vocal, and we made it a point that people need to talk about this. People need to understand the pain, the suffering, and the injustice that's going on in the world.
I want to really, with the whole Aguna idea, I want to start a little way back, because when you talk about Aguna, we have a different thing in mind today than what was initially an issue about. So let's talk about what Agunot initially were in the times of, let's say, the Gemara, versus how it formed into what it is today.
So an Aguna in the Torah is really discussed as a woman whose husband goes away to war and doesn't return. And it isn't, I actually recently was in a shir on this, and the Rav giving the shir said it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that the kind of Aguna that we see today existed, because back before people were able to just travel easily and communities were wider spread, there was a very serious power of the community to convince a man to give a get. The Gemara discusses all sorts of different reasons that a couple might want a divorce, anything from, this isn't what I signed up for. This woman has a mum. She has some sort of thing, blemish is, I guess, the actual definition. But there's something that I thought was normative or normal, and it isn't actually normal, and this isn't what I signed up for. There's a lot of different things discussed in the Gemara as to why a couple might want to dissolve their marriage. But it is very, very clear that Chazal, the rabbis, take the issue of Aguna very seriously. And it's also very clear that it's a recent phenomenon that get refusal exists in the form that it does. It is not clear, it's certainly not in the Torah. It doesn't seem in the Gemara and Chazal that this is what they were discussing. The idea that someone uses a get as a bargaining chip in a secular court, I mean, it's only as relevant for as long as Jews were going to secular court, obviously. So it's a new phenomenon, and all of the things like transportation, the ability to just hop from community to community, and now social media, this new factor that's been introduced, are all things that have changed the game, both how it's perpetrated and also how it's being fought.
So I want to talk a little bit about that. And Rifka, you mentioned it a few minutes ago. In the past, it seemed to be every couple of years or so, there would be a public outcry about Agunot. You would usually generally have like a few people who were in a situation, let's say within the same community or within the greater Orthodox community, and you would hear public outcries about them. And then, as you said, they kind of fizzled out, and then you don't hear about them again for another couple of years. At least this is the way that I had it growing up. There were protests in front of people's houses. There were posters posted in shuls about individuals, and then either they get resolved or people get bored of it, I guess, and then they move on. Then another couple of years happen, and you have another couple of them. Why do you think that is? And do you think that maybe that's not the same as it used to be anymore?
So I think that I think this is definitely different this time around for a few reasons. I'll start talking about the power of social media, and Rifka can add to it because she is far more powerful in social media than I am. But there's a few things that have changed kind of in the world and in the Orthodox community. One of the things, these powerful tools that's now embraced, is something called righteous rage. It's something that for a very long time, it was a bad look to be angry, especially for women. And nowadays, this idea of being outraged about social justice issues, about injustices in certain communities, is something that's actually well respected. And we kind of look down on people who don't raise their voice for it. So social media obviously gives a huge platform for people to be sharing this. But I think the reason it kind of would get dropped for for various reasons throughout the years is because only a few women would come forward. For as many, hashtags that you're seeing for these women on Instagram, there's dozens and dozens who aren't putting themselves out there. And also, it was very hard to keep the anger and the fire going. And I think that now with this new movement of social media influencers, so many of whom are from women, including Rifka, who has over 8,000 followers on her Instagram page, this idea that women are able to influence in a way that the community not just accepts, but they're not really asking permission. It's huge. It's huge, and it's a game changer, and I really don't think it's going away.
Rifka, if you'd like to add to that.
Thank you. Yeah, to add to that, I would say that the world is so much smaller now than it used to be even 10, 15 years ago, because of social media. And we can reach so much further spaces and places because of the network that we are all connected to throughout different platforms. And it would be the case of Mrs. So-and-so who lives in Golders Green in the UK. Her plight and her suffering was only heard in Northwest London. Now, the Aguna who lives in Northwest London is heard in Australia and France and Israel. People campaigning everywhere, and everyone's social media is blasting it. And the humiliation and the embarrassment and the power, the humiliation of the get refuser, and the power that people, women, have in their hands to portray and to publicize what they're going through is so much stronger right now than it's ever been. So it's using social media for the best.
Right, and I guess that goes back to what Ramie was saying. And during the Industrial Revolution, the world got a little bit smaller. Now it's tiny, so it can't just escape. Forget escaping your town and going to the next town or the next country. You can't escape and go to the next continent. Like, people know for the most part who you are, especially with these mass social media campaigns. So you guys have been, I'm going to call it in business. Let's call it in business now for the last 8 months, you said. I want to talk about some of the challenges or opportunities that you guys have faced. Firstly, in case people haven't picked this up yet, based on the fact that it's called Get Out UK, or maybe they heard Rifka's voice. We're talking to people in England right now. And there is another organization in America, Aura, that deals with this. And maybe one day we could have them on as well. But I want to talk about some of the things that you have to deal with. Let's say first in the UK legal system, and the obstacles or challenges, or maybe even helpful parts of the UK system that you've had to either deal with, or they were able to bring you in and help you with.
Rifka, do you want to talk about the prenup, and I'll talk about the defamation stuff?
Well, I was going to start with, first of all, it's like the perfect time to be asking that question, because the whole British, the system has just now recognized in the past few months how get refusal is part of coercive and controlling behavior. And it's not the first step that we would take or advise any woman or person turning to us to help them in their case. So we always try many other routes first, but in a case where there is clear coercive and controlling behavior and no other choice which to turn, we have that law behind us, which is, it's unbelievable that it can now be recognized in the courts, and it's spoken about in the House of Lords, that get refusal is a form of domestic abuse. Over to you, Ramie.
Yeah, so that was really exciting. I think when we started the organization, we did not think that we would be so quickly kind of swept up and involved in helping with this this law. It's really a guidance that's getting, it's a guidance that specifically states that get refusal is a form of domestic violence. So we kind of quickly got swept up into that. And like Rifka said, when she started her story, the movement that's kind of happening right now, the conversation that's happening right now wasn't happening yet. We were a few months before it. Within our first few weeks, we had about 6 or 7 clients. We thought we would really be able to kind of organizationally get organized before we had to start the casework, but that wasn't the case. But we deal with some, beside for those kind of logistical challenges, one of the big challenges we've been facing recently is that there's a lot of publicity and a lot of protests in America for get refusers. And we don't have the same law, though I'm American, I'm living in the UK, we don't have the same laws of free speech here that we have in America. So whereas my instinct, especially growing up kind of surrounded by Aura and their values, is to stage a protest or post pictures or do any of that, we actually could quite easily be sued for defamation. And that is something that is frustrating to our clients. It's also not always in the best interest of the case, but in cases where it could be useful, we have to be so careful with any language we use or we haven't really been, we repost other people's things, but we aren't creating our own flyers. We haven't had any protests. It's also been lockdown here until last week, so it was illegal to do protests, but we have to constantly be asking our lawyer, if we say this in an article, if we want to put this poster out, if we want to do this on social media, are we going to be sued for defamation? And very often the answer is you just can't say anything. You can't say anything that's not like 100% fact that's documented by the law, which makes things difficult. It's just a very different kind of game here than it is in America.
Right. So for most of my audience, most of my regular audience is American, and they might be shocked to hear some of these things, that protesting might be illegal. Like, that's all that's going on in America right now, with a lot of places under lockdown. That's basically all people do for their social activities is to protest. But I do want to touch on something else that you brought up, and that is what the public can do. So here in America, we have protests, we have mass social media campaigns, and you're saying in England that, or in the UK, sorry, I don't know my technical terms for, for the countries. In the UK, that's not a possibility. So if you guys can recommend things that the layperson, so I am not a involved in this situation, Baruch Hashem, nor do I ever plan on being it. But for those of us who would like to help out, what can we do, and maybe differentiate it if you know it first in the UK versus in the United States versus maybe anywhere else you might know about?
We can have protests. We just have to judge each case as an individual and know what's best for each case and know the right way of doing it. So it's not that we can't have it. It's just we can't just like go out and blast full steam ahead. So like Ramie was saying, we just have to like be very careful and really stick to the facts, and everything has to be okayed by our legal advisory board before we go ahead, just to protect, most importantly, the person we're trying to help. What people can do is really talk about things and keep the topic alive, and keep the awareness out there, and approach people who are in that situation, having been in that situation for 10 years. And when I did start talking about it, like I would say 98% of the people who watched my live came back to me. A lot of them were my clients, saying, I had no idea that you were in that situation still, because it's not something we shout out from the rooftops. But it's an ongoing pain, an ongoing noose around your neck, strangling you, that doesn't matter what's going on. Life moves on, life goes on. You take care of your kids, your family, whatever it is. You pay the bills and survive. But there's always that burden on you, that thing choking you forever. So it's just to talk about it and give and not make it that hush taboo topic that it was a year ago that no one can talk about. As well as that is also understanding that sometimes when you don't hear things, it doesn't mean things aren't happening. There's a lot happening behind the scenes. And when things are quiet, it sometimes means that there's a lot happening and a lot going on. So it's also understanding and respecting the space and the process, and trusting the people who are dealing with the process.
I would also add, ask your shul rabbis to talk about it from the pulpit. Ask your shul if they have a policy on allowing get refusers to hold on to their membership, to show up to minyan. Ask your shul if on the bulletin board you can post pictures of get refusers so people know not to let them in shul. Make sure they're not invited to Shabbos meals and they don't feel welcome. One of the things we hear so often from our clients is that their husbands are still part of a frum community, and they still are close with their Rebbe, and they're still getting invited to shuls. And this isn't only the modern Orthodox community. Many of our clients are Haredi, many are Hasidish, and these men, they jump around, and it's not just men, women refuse gets as well. But people who refuse gets, they, sometimes the leadership doesn't step up and do enough to kind of make them feel unwelcome in the community. So we need to demand that of our leadership, and we also need to demand that of ourselves.
So I think something you said is going to be very surprising to a lot of people, that women can be get refusers too. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
So in order for a get to be successfully given, a man has to give it to his wife, and she has to accept it. And it's not common. It's very not common, but there are cases. I think the week Rifka got her get, a man in the community here got his get as well. There are cases where women refuse to accept the get, and it's kind of a big thing. There's like a group of justice for men type guys here who love to engage us in conversation and kind of talk through these issues. And one of the things that they love to say is, if a man approached you and said that he was being denied a get, would you help him? You only help women. And the truth is, we actually have a new client who is a man, and he is being refused his get. We're happy to help anyone and fight for anyone who's being refused a get. We don't believe that this is an issue that exclusively affects women. It mostly affects women by an overwhelming majority. but it's just as painful for a man who can't have his get than it is for a woman who can't have his get. And it's an important thing to kind of shine some light on as well. So people know that it's really a two-way street.
So I want to talk about some of the tactics. Now, you guys are doing it very by the book. You've already explained how kind of walking on I forget what's the
Eggshells.
walking on eggshells. Yes, how much you guys have to walk on eggshells in order to go around the legal system. But there are other tactics that have historically been used. And I was wondering if I can get your opinion on them, or the first one is kind of the violence used against men who refuse to give a get. That's probably the most controversial one. I don't even know in that case who the bad guy is. Here in New York a couple of years ago, there was a whole ring of people that were arrested for that. I was wondering what you guys thought of that particular tactic, and even if it's if it solves the problem.
I mean, I'm not going to condone violence in any way at all. I think, I know it was a measure that was taken. Also, it was something that was done here in the UK until, I don't know, maybe, I think it was the year before I separated. So it must be about 14 years ago now, it stopped. They stopped doing it, but I'm not going to give my blessing to it at all, because I just think that no one should have to stoop to that level, and it's something that should just be done because it has to be done, because it's a halacha, it's a mitzvah, and it's something that has to be done, and there's other ways of dealing with things. So I'm not going to put my name down to saying like, yay, let's go beat someone up.
I agree. I think people get there out of desperation, and it's very difficult and sad to see how far people can be driven when they are desperate for freedom, and they're desperate to free the ones that they love. I'll also say that I think it's probably the most extreme version of what Chazal say, kofin, like that you force him to give the get. And maybe those people take it as license, that it doesn't say specifically how you force them, but it says that you can force someone to give a get in an extreme circumstance. I assume that's where they're taking it from. But again, it's very, very sad to see people get to that point. And hopefully these men are put out of business because the Bate Din are doing their piece and people are getting their gets. But we know that that's not the case. But violence is obviously never the answer.
All right, so let me talk about a less controversial one, but that still carries with it some controversy, which is protesting family members, or bringing family members of the man, or maybe in some small cases the women, into the issues.
Oh, I totally agree that it should. That's my personal opinion. I think that whatever measure, obviously there is a process. Again, like I said, there's always a process and a way of doing things, but I do believe that if it reaches the point that you're not getting anywhere with a get refuser, then to put the pressure onto the family, and for them to put the pressure onto the get refuser, I fully believe that is one way on hopefully trying to achieve a result. I do believe that it's one thing for every family can have its black sheep, but when it starts to affect the parents and the siblings and the nieces and the nephews and whatever else it takes, that's when it gets serious, and that's when hopefully like a result will be more you'll achieve a quicker result.
So would it matter, let's say a family that is supporting the get refuser versus a family who's either not really involved or has already come out against it? Would the pressure be different in those two cases?
Yeah, I don't think in the case of a family that's estranged from the get refuser, that it's probably not useful, and it's also actually not really fair. We've seen many families make excuses for their children not giving gets, and it can be anything from financial to a custody battle to it's none of your business and stay out of our family. But if the family is not estranged and they have a relationship, then it's important to put the pressure anywhere you can put the pressure. And it's actually, I think, one of the most successful tactics that gets used is putting pressure on the family, whether it's the family's business or their reputation within the community. We've heard from other organizations and networks that that's actually a tremendously successful route to take. And I think I agree with Rifka. I think it's 100% fair.
And just to add to that one more thing, I think that, again, every case has to be judged as an individual, and I don't think there's any set rule or any set way of doing things, but I think it depends on the family, on the circumstance, on their relationship with the person. But in general, our feeling is, yeah, do it.
I'm gonna ask you guys a question that might not fall under your purview, but I'm not sure if you maybe have come across it. For a man, is there such a thing as giving a get too early? But what I mean by that is there an amount of time that a man should wait before giving a get within the divorce process? Meaning there's still the whole legal court system. Let's say here in America, I'm not sure about the British court system. It could take months, years, however long it takes to go through a divorce. Is there a time frame that one should give a get within from the time that the divorce has been tried versus until the legal side of it has been resolved? Is there a specific time frame?
So I think what Rifka said about every case being very different is important. We've also been asked, like, at what point is a woman on Aguna? Is it after a day? Is it after a week? I think it's really important to state that the get process is very, very separate and should remain separate from any court proceedings. One of the things that we've seen and we know is not uncommon is that when people say we're going to wait till after court to deal with the get, what they mean is, if I get what I want in court, then I'm going to give or accept the get. And if I don't like what happens in court, I'm going to use the get as a bargaining chip to try to either get back more money, get back more custody, and either not give or not accept the get. And one of the things we encourage our clients, and Rifka can speak to this as well, is to really make sure that the get process is completely separate from any other legal proceedings, because it gets messy when the two come together. I don't think it's ever too early to give the get. I actually think it's a very nice token of goodwill to move forward in any other cases. It's a gesture that says, I respect you. And this is why the halachic prenup is so important, because the giving of a get is an act of love. It's an act of setting someone free so they can move on with their life. So it's never too early in the process to tell your partner, no matter where we go in the rest of the proceedings, I want you to know that I care about you enough to grant you your freedom so you can remarry, move on, have more children, or just not feel this chokehold. It's never too early, but it is all too often too late. So as soon as people can get themselves to the Beit Din, I think is when they should do it.
Just because you mentioned the halachic prenup, I was curious, is it different in America versus the UK?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Prenups in general are very different here. The legal system here doesn't recognize a married man and a woman as two separate entities the same way that the American court does. So the halachic prenup here, I know that the London Beit Din has it, but it's very different. It basically is just an agreement on a Beit Din that they would use. But it doesn't hold up in secular court the same way it does in America.
Okay, yeah, I can see that being an issue. Before we get to all the particulars about your organization and where people could learn more, is there anything else you guys think is important to impart on our audience?
Rifka, do you want to talk about the Pikuach Nefesh stuff?
Okay, yeah, it's actually something that we're thank you, Ramie. It's actually something that we're working on this evening. We've been working on it a lot, and this past week is a common thread that we've seen with all the cases that we're working through is such huge issues with the leaders of our community, with all the Bati Din around, and the fact that women or people are not being heard, they're not being listened to, and the severity of the case is not being addressed. And this leads to the point of people feeling completely desperate. And we have many people who have actually told us that they have contemplated ending their life, taking their life and just ending the suffering and the pain and not being heard and not being listened to. And we want to emphasize how being an Aguna is pikuach nefesh, being refused again every day, that these people are waiting. Someone sends an email and it takes 3 weeks to get a response. Those 3 weeks, these people are at the state that they can end their life, and these leaders have that on their hands. They have to take this as a life and death situation, and they need to prioritize every single step of this until the get is given. It shouldn't take a year, it shouldn't take 10 years, it shouldn't take any amount of time longer than 3-4 months just to do the paperwork, do what you got to do, and get the get given. If that, it has to be a non-negotiable, it's just something that has to be done. And they have to stop giving the get refuser has to stop knowing they've got this power that they can hold over someone. It's not something that they can hold over anyone. It's just something that has to be given. They have people's lives in their hands.
That's very powerful. Ramie, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to say from my own experience over the last 8 months or however long it's been, just to kind of circle back to how you started this, I think one of the reasons that people get very passionate about this and then drop it as an issue is because it's very hard to face the fact that there is evil in our communities. And this isn't the only issue that gets a lot of airtime and then goes away, and people are very passionate about it but stop talking about it because there are skeletons in our closet as a community. And and I'm not saying there aren't cases that are complicated, and there are, and this is not an across the board, every single person, who's waiting for their get, the person they're married to is a Russia. I'm not saying that. There are certainly cases that are complicated. There's miscommunications. That's what we try to help people smooth over. But there are cases, these men who are on the run, these men who are, hopping from country to country, community to community. There's evil in our community. And that is a really, really difficult thing for us to face. It's a difficult thing for us to talk to our children about. And it's a very difficult thing for us to act on. And I think that's, something that we have to kind of face head on. This is a serious it's a serious blemish, damage on our community, and we are each responsible for making sure that we erase it, and that we do our part, because there is evil in our community, and pretending it's not there, it doesn't take away the pain of each person who's being denied.
Where can people learn more about you if you guys want to plug any social medias that you're on? And I'm assuming you guys are a not-for-profit or wherever the UK equivalent is, or where can people go to donate?
Yeah, so you can donate on our website at GETToutUK.org.
Can you spell that out?
GETTOUTUK.org. Two
Great.
T's in get. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at GetOutUK, GETTOUTUK. We do a lot of educational stuff on Instagram. We do some interesting lives. We do fundraisers. We do giveaways. We are not for profit. And right now, every single penny that you donate goes directly to these women. And, the man, maybe men, but right now man, who are struggling to receive their get. So this is a non-for-profit. It's 100% all charity work. And every penny helps. And
from what I understand, you two don't take a salary for this as of right now, correct?
That is true. Every penny goes to helping with legal cases, therapy, anything the women need is really what we're there for.
That's phenomenal. All right, Ramie and Rifka, thank you guys so much for giving us some of your time. And the time difference is probably a little crazy right now, but I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
My thanks to Ramie Smith and Rifka Meyer for joining me this week. One of the more interesting parts of this conversation for me was learning about the differences between how we are allowed to battle get refusers here in the States versus some of the limitations imposed in the UK. It should serve as a reminder that although we are accustomed to a certain lifestyle in America, those who live elsewhere may have obstacles that we don't have here. And this could potentially be something we look into for future episodes. For now, we wish Hatzlacha to Ramie and Rifka in their fight for the freedom of Agunos in the UK, and hopefully one day their services will no longer be necessary. And of course, to all of you, Kol Tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Sreli Pikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg. Follow us on Facebook at The Jewish Living Podcast and on Twitter and Instagram at Jewish_living. You can also email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queen's Jewish Link.